I joined the company I'm currently working at right out of college, and this is my 10th year there. I took maternity leave when I gave birth, but as soon as my son turned one, I returned and have been working hard in sales ever since. Because of my consistent efforts, a promotion is on the horizon, and lately, work has become even more enjoyable. On the other hand, my husband, who is 3 years younger than me, has been job hopping since before we got married. He wants to start his own business someday. According to him, to become a successful entrepreneur in the future, it's better to gather experience from various companies rather than stick to one place. But when I look at his current situation, every time he changes jobs, his salary seems to go down. I've always wondered if he's truly gaining any skills, but felt I had to support the household to make his dream come true. I wanted to believe in the potential of the man I loved. However, he betrayed me in an unthinkable way. He tried to trap me. For about the first 2 years of our marriage, things were great between us. Due to his unstable job situation, our life wasn't easygoing, but it was fun dreaming with him about building our own house once his business took off for taking trips abroad. However, things started changing around the time our son was born. He became noticeably colder towards me. Looking back now, maybe he didn't change much, but having a child made me realize his true nature. In fact, I see many dads in suits dropping off their kids at daycare. But no matter what I said, he remained stubborn. To avoid constant fights, I eventually gave in. Between my early starts, overtime, housework, and childcare, I was stretched thin but pushed on for my family. It would have been nice if someone could have talked some sense into him. The only person he seemed to respect, my FIL, unfortunately, was on a work assignment in another state. My FIL always understood and appreciated my work, often praising me for managing both my job and household chores. Even during my pregnancy, he advised his son to take care of me. However, not long after our son was born, he was transferred far away. His wife, my MIL, stayed at their home. Unlike him, she was soft on her son and always took his side, so she wasn't of much help. Being a longtime housewife, my MIL seemed to disapprove of me continuing to work post-childbirth. She might have also been bothered by her son's unstable job history. It irked her that I, his wife, was achieving more at work. She'd often drop sarcastic comments about me neglecting my duties as a wife and mother by focusing too much on my job. She was probably aware that I was the one who mainly supported the family financially. Though at one point, she even said it was cruel to leave our son at daycare for long hours and that I should just quit my job. Probably with my fill away, she felt a bit lonely. She'd occasionally drop by our place, throw some shade, and then leave. It was hurtful being criticized one-sidedly, but I thought maybe it's just hard for older folks with traditional views to understand. I kind of resigned myself to it. But what's worse, it seemed my husband also begrudged my success at work. One day, I got a raise because of my hard work. However, when I reported it to my husband, all he replied was, "Okay." I was saddened that he couldn't even offer a simple congratulations, even just as a courtesy. Eventually, he began to berate me, suggesting that I was becoming conceited just because I was earning a bit more. I faced continual criticism from my husband and mother-in-law. I began to wonder why I was working so hard every day, and even started regretting marrying him. Moreover, day by day, my husband started coming home later and later. Back then, he worked at a factory and was supposed to finish work at a set time. However, sometimes he didn't return home until late at night. When I asked why he was so late, he would always claim he was working. I didn't believe him, but whenever I tried to get a clear reason, he'd quickly become irritable, so I didn't press him too much. but I couldn't help feeling suspicious about his odd behavior. Then the unexpected happened. One evening, my mother-in-law dropped by our house and announced. While it was common for her to visit without notice, that particular day had been exhausting for me. Earlier, there had been a field day for my son, and after several days of overtime and waking up early to make sandwiches for lunch, I just wanted to sleep early, especially since I had an important business meeting the next morning. My son seemed to be also tired. By the time my mother-in-law arrived, he was already in his bedroom. But with her there, I couldn't just go to bed. Feeling obligated, I dragged my tired body to the kitchen to make her some coffee. However, suddenly my husband grabbed my arm. Confused, I looked up to see him saying, "You must be tired. Let me do it." It was rare for him to offer to help in the kitchen. Usually, no matter how tired I was from work, he'd make me handle everything from cooking to cleaning. I figured he was probably just trying to show off in front of my mother-in-law. Thinking he's all talk, no action, I tried to proceed to the kitchen, ignoring him. But he didn't let go of my arm. With a firm tone, he said, "Just sit and rest," possibly guiding me to the couch. I was in a bind. If I let my husband make some coffee, my mother-in-law would start grumbling. She'd probably grumble about how I was bossing him around. However, to my surprise, even my mother-in-law said, "Just sit down and relax," holding me back with a smile. While I was talking to her, my husband went to the kitchen and began making some coffee. Something was off. There's no way they'd both suddenly become so kind. What's going on today? As I pondered, my husband came over with a tray of cups. "Well, have some coffee," he smiled, placing the cup in front of me. I thanked him but kept a close eye on him. He kept sneaking glances at me. Even my mother-in-law seemed unusually restless. Something was definitely up. I then turned my gaze to my cup, and it hit me. I realized he was up to something. There was a reason behind their sudden kindness. I wasn't going to fall for their tricks. I decided to act immediately. Oh boy, they better be ready. I won't hold back anymore. Lifting the cup in front of me, I stopped just before taking a sip and said to my husband, "Don't we have some cookies? Shall we eat?" Normally, my husband would never serve snacks to guests, but since he told me to sit and rest today, he would have to bring the cookies. At first, he looked clueless, but as I expected, he said, "Oh, right," and got up to fetch the snacks from the kitchen. My mother-in-law said, "Oh, I'm sorry to bother you," and went to the kitchen as well. I didn't miss this opportunity. When my husband returned with cookies, I finally took a sip from my cup. My mother-in-law, who was sitting next to me, started drinking her coffee as well. For a while, the three of us made small talk, and I showed my mother-in-law a video of our son's field day. But both my husband and mother-in-law kept glancing at me strangely. Despite feeling their intense stares, I drank my coffee with a straight face. Seeing me like this, my husband tilted his head. Just when I thought things would pass without incident, something did happen. My mother-in-law's face turned pale, and she suddenly stood up. She then bolted out of the living room, clutching her stomach. She was headed for the bathroom. I thought to myself, I knew it, and looked at my husband. He stood there, eyes wide open in shock. Then for a moment, he shot me a glare before hurrying after my mother-in-law. Outside the bathroom, he was banging on the door, shouting, "Mom, are you okay?" She was groaning in the bathroom, but I couldn't make out what exactly my mother-in-law was saying. I could kind of guess from her groans, though. After a few minutes, my husband returned to the living room, leaving my mother-in-law in the bathroom. His face was pale, and he bit his lip. I said to him, "Seems like you put something in my coffee, huh? So it was you after all." He shouted back with bulging eyes. I smirked. "No, it was you, right?" I just switched my coffee with your mother's because it looked suspicious. You're the worst wife ever, suspecting me like that, he retorted. Well, which one of us is the worst, really? I bet you put in laxatives or something, right? There was some weird powder on the edge of the cup. It was too obvious. There was a small amount of white powder on the rim, and inside the cup my husband had given me. If you were someone who made coffee often, I wouldn't have been suspicious. But my husband never does household chores, and my mother-in-law thinks it's natural to boss me around. Them being nice and letting me rest was too good to be true, so I was careful about my husband's actions and the coffee he gave me. After being confronted, my husband confessed everything. He planned to mess up an important business meeting I had the next day by making me sick. If their plan had worked, I would have had to cancel my meeting or would have been running to the bathroom during it, possibly hurting my reputation at work. Putting something in someone's drink is clearly a crime. Do they really hate me that much to stoop so low? I started to pity them. My husband, now utterly defiant, glared at me and said, "If anything happens to my mom, I'll sue you for compensation, you know." However, I replied with a smirk, "What are you talking about? You'd be the one to pay me compensation. I've known all along that you've been cheating." What? My husband froze on the spot. Even though he had plenty of free time, he'd always claimed to be working late. On his days off, he'd go out alone, leaving virtually no quality time with the family. And when he was home, he was constantly on his phone. I felt suspicious, so I hired a detective agency to track him down. The findings were as I'd expected, damning evidence. He had posed as a single man at a bar, met a young woman, and started dating her by lying about starting a business soon. The naive girl, fresh out of college and unfamiliar with the ways of the world, must have believed his lies. Later on, he tried to explain himself, saying he wanted to boost his self-esteem by dating a young woman. I could easily picture him bragging about becoming a big shot in the future. If he had that much free time, he should have been working harder. Perhaps it was always unrealistic to think that a man as spoiled as my husband would ever start his own business. Perhaps he didn't expect his affair to be exposed, but seeing his pale face, I firmly said, "Let's get a divorce. You'll have to pay me compensation, and of course, child support too." Realizing there was no way out, my husband resignedly said, "Fine." But he added, "Just so you know, I'm taking half of the savings. I know you've been secretly stashing away money." "There is no money for you to take," I chuckled inside. "Most of the remaining savings are from my single days. Money saved before marriage isn't subject to property division." Hearing this, he said, "That can't be right, but you've been earning recently too." "The money I've made recently, with you hardly contributing, has been spent on living expenses." Hearing this, he hung his head in despair. I added, "By the way, all the furniture and appliances in the house were bought with my money. Don't even think of taking them, okay? The house lease is under my name, so just pack your things and leave ASAP." Then I told my mother-in-law, who had just come out of the bathroom with a weary face, "I'll be reporting this to your husband." My mother-in-law pleaded, "Please don't tell him," but I went ahead and called my father-in-law. As expected, he was furious and asked my mother-in-law to get a divorce. After realizing he had no financial gain from the property division, it seemed my husband finally understood the gravity of his situation. "I don't want to break up. I can't live without you, Betty," he cried and pleaded, even going as far as to kneel and beg. But an apology now wouldn't change how I felt. I hired a lawyer and successfully divorced him. I demanded a large amount of money for compensation and child support. With a low income, he couldn't pay the compensation in a lump sum and ended up with massive debts. However, the punishment didn't stop there. I had filed a police report that my husband and mother-in-law had put laxatives in my coffee, resulting in both receiving guilty verdicts for assault. Though they got suspended sentences, they now have criminal records. In the end, my husband was dumped by his mistress. To repay his debts, he worked tirelessly day and night. My mother-in-law also got divorced, so they now live a miserably poor life together. He got what he deserved for trying to sabotage me, the backbone of our family, out of sheer jealousy. As for me, I recently had a very successful business deal and was promoted to the sales team leader. I moved out of the apartment I shared with my husband and rented a new condo. My son and I are living happily together now. While my first marriage was a failure, I'll keep working hard and try to enjoy my life. Take care, everyone.